Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Joseph Saunier. Joseph Saunier was born in 1955 to a respected family of doctors in Shreveport, Louisiana. From a young age, he aspired to follow in his family's footsteps and become a doctor. With exceptional abilities, Joseph earned a Bachelor of Science in Medical Science from the University of Baton Rouge in 1976. He then applied to Louisiana State University in Shreveport and began working at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas. Joseph effectively balanced his university studies and work. He consistently refined his knowledge through hands-on experience at the hospital. The hospital management recognized Joseph's success and dedication, and in his final year of training, he was appointed chief resident. After completing his studies, Joseph chose to specialize in pathologic anatomy and went on to become a pathologist and laboratory director in Leck, Texas. Joseph's life was marked by personal tragedy, including the loss of the woman he loved, Becky. His 27-year marriage, which he considered happy, ended in divorce when his wife fell in love with another man. Joseph accepted her decision and agreed to the divorce, believing that the woman he loved had found happiness. Joseph had a strong sense of responsibility and nobility. After his divorce from Becky, he maintained a warm relationship with her and continued to support their two sons. 2 years later, Becky was killed by her new husband. Joseph was shocked by her death. He often thought about their past family life and mourned her loss. Despite his own grief, Joseph remained a source of strength for his family. He took care of the funeral expenses and helped his sons cope with the trauma. His sons later credited his support for helping them overcome their pain. The tragedy had a profound impact on Joseph. He devoted himself to his work and raising his sons. However, the grief finally gave him the motivation to change his life. He decides to start a new chapter in a new city. In 2007, Joseph moved to Leck, Texas, with his sons, where he became the chief pathologist at Covenant Health System. Feeling the need for a change, Joseph enrolled in a local dance studio. He enjoyed the classes and met new women, which helped fill the void in his life. A few times, Joseph attempted to form connections with his dance partners, but it never worked out. That was until Michelle Tina walked into his dance class on a warm summer evening. Her elegance, poise, sense of humor, and sparkling eyes immediately caught his attention. Her radiant smile illuminated the room, and Joseph knew right then that she was the one he had been searching for. Michelle, too, noticed Joseph's confident and respectful demeanor on the dance floor. As they danced together, the 47-year-old Michelle and 57-year-old Joseph found that they complemented each other perfectly. As they continued to dance together, they grew closer with each passing session. Eventually, Joseph asked Michelle out on a date, and she agreed. This marked the beginning of what seemed like a happy new chapter in both of their lives. Michelle possessed an irresistible charm that had a profound effect on men. Michelle was a classic example of a femme fatale, a woman with an undeniable magnetism that drew attention and sparked passion in those around her. Michelle, like Joseph, is also starting a new life after personal emotional breakdowns. She is running away from the fear and anxiety associated with Mike Dixon, owner of a private clinic for cosmetic surgery. Michelle met Mike in 2008 when she came in for Botox injections. At first, there was just casual social interaction between them, then light flirting followed and they began a romance. Michelle is a successful and free woman. She worked as an executive in the NFL, built a successful career, and didn't lack for anything. Mike, on the other hand, is bound by his marriage. A few months after living a double life, his wife discovered his affair with Michelle and filed for divorce after 20 years of marriage. Mike is so captivated by Michelle that he barely notices that he is losing everything. Mike left his wife for Michelle, even though she never announced she would marry him. When Mike doesn't get the attention he expected, he tries to pressure Michelle, which scares her. Michelle recognized Mike's manipulative behavior and desire to take complete control of her life. This realization caused her to end the relationship. In 2010, Michelle and Mike went their separate ways. However, even after the breakup, Mike continued to pursue Michelle, urging her to return. His obsession exceeds the limit, forcing Michelle to find a way to escape Mike's control. Michelle moved to Lech to start anew, where she met Joseph, a charming and kind-hearted man. They quickly connected, and their relationship blossomed into true love. Joseph's sons and relatives welcomed Michelle with open arms. Joseph spared no expense in giving her gifts, taking her to the most luxurious restaurants and private clubs, and giving her romantic vacations. As Joseph realized he had found his perfect match, he took Michelle to Los Angeles and proposed to her in front of his entire family. Michelle, 47 at the time, was smitten with her new partner and frequently expressed her love for him on social media. However, her ex-lover, Mike Dixon, couldn't help but notice these declarations of love. Mike is furious when he discovers that Michelle has moved away and is planning to marry Joseph. He realized he couldn't win her back, but still dared to propose that they rekindle their past relationship, suggesting they become lovers again. Michelle firmly rejected his proposal, refusing to engage in a love triangle, and immediately informed Joseph about Mike's suggestion. After some time, they started to feel like they were being watched. At one point, they even noticed something that looked like a camera flash through the backyard window, but they didn't pay much attention to it, not realizing the seriousness of the problem. The situation got out of control on July 11, 2012, when a gardener came to Joseph's house to discuss a garden renovation project. When the landscaper arrived at the home, he tried to contact Joseph but got no response. He saw an open door and, thinking Joseph might not be able to hear him, went inside. The house was in disarray, and there was a bullet hole near the front door, indicating a possible intruder. The landscaper cautiously went further inside, looking for Joseph. In the garage, he found Joseph lying in a pool of blood on the floor with no signs of life. Joseph's body had stab and gunshot wounds, leading the landscaper to think the perpetrator might be nearby. He immediately left the house and called for help. At 2:48 p.m., the police department received the call, and several patrol cars were sent to the scene. When the officers arrived, they found Joseph Sonnier. Medics confirmed that Joseph had died. The incident shocked the public, as it happened in one of the city's safest and most affluent neighborhoods, where crime is extremely rare. Joseph, a respected professional, was known for his calm and kind nature, and it seemed he had no enemies who would want to harm him. Although a window was broken, it was clear that the incident was not a robbery, as nothing was missing from the house. However, a bottle with a hole shot through its bottom was found at the scene, suggesting it was used as a makeshift silencer for a gun. A forensic team arrived soon after to collect evidence, and it appeared that the perpetrator was inexperienced, as they left behind many traces. DNA from the bottle and blood samples were sent to a lab for further analysis. Detectives interviewed neighbors, but none of them reported seeing or hearing anything suspicious. There were no CCTV cameras near the house. According to the investigation, the perpetrator entered through a large window overlooking the backyard, making the attack unexpected. In the dining room, the attacker confronted Joseph and started shooting. It is likely that the wine bottle was used as a silencer at this point. Blood stains in the hallway suggested that Joseph was still alive after being shot. He entered the garage, where the attacker caught up with him and stabbed him multiple times. An autopsy revealed 5 gunshot wounds and 11 stab wounds. The circumstances suggested that the murder was not random, but the identity and motive of the killer remained unknown. The investigation focused on the people closest to the victim. During an interview with law enforcement, the victim's fiancée, Michelle, reported strange things in the months leading up to the murder. She believed Joseph was being stalked. Michelle had seen a stranger lurking outside Joseph's house, watching the door and windows. She also mentioned that Joseph had received persistent calls and texts in the period leading up to his death. Although officers confirmed this information, they initially thought the calls and messages were from other women with whom Joseph was allegedly having relationships, as witnesses claimed he was in contact with multiple women at the time. Investigators questioned Michelle about whether she knew of other women involved with Joseph. Michelle claimed she was unaware of any other women. Joseph's sons also denied the possibility of their father having mistresses, stating that infidelity was not in his character. Despite this, investigators continued to explore a motive of jealousy for the crime. During the subsequent interrogation, Michelle succumbs to the pressure and reveals that she knows several women who may be involved in the crime. According to Michelle, these women are ex-girlfriends who often stalk Joseph. Although he ignored them, they continued to express their displeasure about his upcoming wedding to Michelle. The women in question include a woman from Florida who persisted in contacting Joseph even after he revealed his relationship with Michelle. There was also a nurse, Joseph's colleague, who often called and wrote to him. Additionally, a woman whose daughter sent a letter accusing Joseph of abandoning them shortly before the murder. In the same interview, Michelle mentioned Mike Dixon for the first time. She hadn't thought about Mike spying on her and Joseph before, because Mike stopped paying attention to her after she refused to be his lover. Michelle assumed that Mike had accepted her decision to marry Joseph and move on with his own life. The police visited Mike. He cooperated and spoke with the detectives. Mike revealed that he had been deeply in love with Michelle and had even divorced his wife to pursue a future with her. However, after Michelle rejected him, Mike gave up. He started a new relationship with a younger medical student who corroborated his alibi. At the time of the crime, Mike was at work and then spent time with his new girlfriend, which confirmed he couldn't have been involved. The investigation encountered significant obstacles. Every suspect, including Michelle, had a solid alibi, leaving detectives stumped. They searched for enemies of Joseph or individuals who might benefit financially from his death. But no new leads emerged. Unfortunately, forensic analysis does not provide any information about an individual, so police cannot identify the owner of the DNA found at the crime scene. Just as the case seemed hopeless, the police received an unexpected call from Paul Reynolds. Reynolds reported that his roommate, David Shepard, had recently confessed to a murder in Leck, and then attempted to take his own life but was saved. According to Reynolds, a neighbor shared specific details about David's crimes with him, including details that only a few detectives knew, such as the use of a glass bottle as a silencer. This new information led police to conclude that Shepard was indeed connected to the crime. The witness came forward claiming that David was not the mastermind behind the crime, but rather a person who was hired by an unknown doctor involved in plastic surgery. Police launched an investigation into the new suspect and discovered that Mike Dixon was the person who hired David. When questioned at the police station, David began to confess and revealed that Mike Dixon had indeed hired him to commit the crime. According to David, he and Mike met at a bar while both were going through difficult breakups and formed a friendship. Mike shared his sadness over his lost love, Michelle, who was now engaged to someone else. He claimed that he couldn't move on and was willing to do whatever it took to win her back. David alleged that the initial plan was to discredit Joseph, Michelle's current partner, in the hopes that Michelle would leave him and return to Mike. However, David claimed that murder was not part of the original plan. First, women were paid $1,000 each to pretend to be Joseph's mistresses and pursue him. Additionally, a letter arrived from a woman claiming Joseph had abandoned her and their child. Joseph consistently denied these allegations, and Michelle believed him. It was later revealed that the camera flash seen by the couple was actually the light from David's cell phone flashlight. David had been driving to their house to create the illusion of surveillance. Funded by Mike Dixon, who covered gas and other expenses. When these tactics failed to break the couple apart, Mike plotted a more extreme solution. He offered David 3 silver bars, valued at around $110,000, to kill the pathologist. David agreed and received one of the bars as a deposit, which he immediately sold at a pawn shop. According to David Shepard, the situation escalated out of control when he went to Joseph's house. He claimed the shooting was unintentional, and that after shooting Joseph, he became afraid and Joseph began to run away. David shouted to check on Joseph but received no response. He then followed Joseph into the garage, where he found Joseph lying still and heard his last breath. David rushed to check Joseph's pulse and confirmed that Joseph was dead. David admitted to stabbing Joseph several times but could not remember the exact number. David also admitted that he considered calling for help using Joseph's phone, but ultimately chose not to. Instead, he put the phone back, mutilated Joseph's body, and then went to Mike's house to get the rest of the gold before attempting to take his own life. According to David, he didn't fully understand what he was getting himself into. When he faced Joseph, he realized he could not continue killing. If it weren't for an accidental gunshot, Joseph might still be alive. Mike Dixon was arrested by the police on the same day and charged with first-degree murder. This was based on testimony from David, as well as a large amount of other evidence that included incriminating phone calls and text messages where Mike made explicit confessions. When Mike Dixon was first interviewed by detectives, they had hoped he would confess to the crime. However, he denied everything and asked for a lawyer, which led to a lawsuit. David Sherd, who had been involved in the crime, made a deal with the prosecutor where he pleaded guilty to his role and gave up his right to appeal the sentence. As a result of this deal, David received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, instead of the death penalty. Mike Dixon, on the other hand, maintained that he was not guilty despite the circumstantial evidence against him. However, in a surprising turn of events, David, who was a key witness for the prosecution, changed his story during the trial. Under oath, David claimed that he had committed the crime alone and that Mike Dixon was not involved. He said that the silver bars found at the scene were meant to be used as an investment in a business that the two of them had planned to start. The jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict, and a retrial was declared. The second trial occurred in 2016, resulting in Mike's conviction for first-degree murder and a life sentence without parole. However, his lawyers successfully appealed the judgment, and it was overturned. Mike was released on $2 million bail, but the case was far from over. The prosecution sought to reinstate the original sentence through the state's highest criminal court, which would have otherwise led to a third trial. On February 11, 2019, the prosecution's motion was granted, and in April 2020, Mike's bail was revoked, prompting a new arrest warrant. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals ultimately reversed the lower court's decision, reinstating Mike's life sentence without parole. The judge ordered Mike to continue serving his sentence, and he is currently incarcerated in a Texas prison. The case of Maria Alejandra Lafuente Casco. Maria Alejandra Lafuente Casco, a stunning brunette with bright brown eyes and thick black eyelashes, lived in Mexico City. Alejandra took great pride in her appearance, considering herself the epitome of female beauty. Alejandra's success wasn't limited to her physical appearance. Her father, Dr. Alberto Dente, was a renowned psychiatrist with a doctorate in sciences. Following in his footsteps, Alejandra had built a successful career of her own. Alejandra's father was a renowned scientist specializing in psychiatric disorders. She idolized him and aspired to follow in his footsteps, enrolling in the top psychiatry university and graduating with honors, thanks to her hard work and his connections. After completing her studies, Alejandra shifted her focus from psychiatry to psychotherapy. With her father's financial support, she obtained a license and set up her own practice in a prestigious business center in the capital. Alejandra's first marriage, to her ex-husband, ended in divorce, but she has two beautiful daughters who have inherited their father's eyes and sense of humor. Despite this failure, Alejandra still hopes and continues to dream of finding a partner who can be a good father to her daughters. After the divorce, her ex-husband would visit the children regularly on weekends, helping with housework and spending time with them. During one such visit, Alejandra asked him to enter the house through the backyard, claiming that the front door was jammed. Little did he know that this would be his last visit. Once inside, Alejandra told him that their youngest daughter was taking a bath and asked him to go into the bathroom with her. The ex-husband walked into the house, not knowing what was about to happen. The eerie silence was a complete contrast to the usual bustling atmosphere. There was no sound of cartoons or children's laughter. The ex-husband went to the bathroom. He noticed the tape on the floor and his daughter was not in the bathtub full of water. A feeling of unease began to appear, and he suddenly realized that something was very wrong. At that moment, Alejandra appeared behind him, holding a hammer, and hit him on the head with all her strength. She struck another blow, and the ex-husband collapsed to the ground, blood pouring from the open wound on his skull. A horrific scene unfolded as the ex-husband lay covered in blood. Experts later determined that he had no chance of survival, and that death occurred almost immediately after the first blow. The eldest daughter, who had unexpectedly returned home early from a friend's house, happened to witness the horrific scene. The children were no strangers to their parents' frequent quarrels, but this time the situation had escalated to a deadly level. The daughter, shocked and distressed, ran away from home and called for help. A neighbor responded quickly and called the police. Authorities arrived promptly and arrested Alejandra, charging her with murder. After her arrest, Alejandra was held in a cell for a month until her first trial. Throughout the proceedings, Alejandra maintained her innocence. Her lawyers argued that she had acted in self-defense, citing her ex-husband's history of intense jealousy. According to the defense, her ex-husband fabricated statements that Alejandra had brought men into the house, which allegedly affected the mental health of their daughters. On the day of the incident, Alejandra's ex-husband unexpectedly showed up at her home, entering through the back door in an attempt to catch her with another man. When he found Alejandra alone in the bathroom, he attacked her. In self-defense, Alejandra struck her ex-husband twice in the back of the head. After considering the evidence and taking into account the presence of Alejandra's two young daughters, the court delivered its verdict on June 14, 2012. Alejandra was sentenced to 1 year and 4 months in prison. However, thanks to her lawyer's efforts and financial support from her father, her prison sentence was suspended and she was released. A few months later, the appeal was refiled, this time with a request to dismiss the charges. The defense argued that she had acted in self-defense. Human rights activists advocated for a jury trial, sympathizing with she who was portrayed as a victim of domestic violence. The court reviewed the case and ultimately acquitted her. After her release, she resumed providing psychological counseling. Alejandra successfully created a public image of a victim of gender inequality who fought for her rights and emerged victorious. This image boosted her popularity among potential clients. Around this time, she met Alan Carrera Cuellar, a prominent Mexican businessman and the son of Adrian Carrera Francis, a former head of special services for the Central District who had enjoyed a distinguished career. Alan was a tall, handsome, and statuesque man. Alan soon expanded his business and opened a chain of construction stores across the country. However, his success came with a hidden cost. Part of his business was connected to organized crime, and this fact was kept hidden from most people. Unfortunately for his family, his involvement in financial fraud eventually came to light, resulting in his father losing his job. As it turned out, Alan had a significant stake in a criminal organization that smuggled psychotropic substances into the United States. The group operated from a base in a border town where they were protected by corrupt police officers. This organization controlled a portion of the South's psychotropic substance trafficking. Alan's father was eventually linked to his son's crimes and was forced to cooperate with the authorities, giving a statement that incriminated him. He was initially sentenced to 20 years in prison but was unexpectedly released from prison on July 18, 2000, after being enrolled in a witness protection program. Alan was always surrounded by women, but he had been in love with a classmate since childhood, whom he eventually married. The marriage was brief but happy, and they had a beautiful daughter. However, Alan's frequent absence from home due to work led to their divorce. He found it extremely difficult to part with she he had loved since high school. Subsequent relationships brought him no joy, and the loneliness and sadness led him to gradually develop a drinking problem. Alan struggled with chronic depression and developed an alcohol addiction, which led to a destructive habit. To overcome this, he tried various methods, including reading books, attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and seeking professional help. He eventually found Dr. Alberto, a renowned psychiatrist. Unknown to Alan, his therapist, Dr. Alberto, was also preparing his ex-wife for psychotherapy. However, Dr. Alberto informed his ex-wife that he could not treat her for ethical reasons, since he was already treating Alan psychologically. Instead, he referred her to another psychiatrist, Maria Alejandra. Alberto did not disclose his personal relationship with Maria Alejandra to his ex-wife because this could create a conflict of interest in the therapeutic relationship. Alejandra soon discovered that Alan could be the perfect match for her. He was described as a kind and wealthy man in his prime. Without hesitation, Alejandra asked her client to bring her ex-husband in for another therapy session, claiming she could resolve their issues in one visit and help them break their strong emotional bond. As soon as the session began, Alejandra and Alan started working on a plan to seduce each other. After the session, Alan invited Alejandra out for coffee to discuss his family problems. Although Alejandra initially declined the invitation, citing professional ethics, they ended up going on a date that same evening. An affair quickly developed between them. Alan's ex-wife was shocked to discover what had happened. She considered reporting the incident to the doctor's ethics committee, but ultimately decided against it. Alejandra, a competent specialist, convinced her that pursuing the matter was motivated by jealousy and an inability to let go of the past. The doctor believed that holding on to these feelings would hinder her chances of a happy future. Ultimately, Alan's ex-wife chose not to report the affair. Meanwhile, her sessions with the doctor came to an end. Alan and Alejandra's relationship progressed quickly. Within a few months of their first date, they decided to move in together. 2 months later, they decided to get married. However, Alan was unaware of the secrets that Alejandra was hiding, including the reason behind her divorce from her ex-husband. In April 2014, Alan traveled to visit his parents for the weekend, which turned out to be the perfect opportunity to discuss his upcoming wedding with them. However, Alan's parents were shocked to learn about his fiancée, Alejandra, as they had never heard of her before. A week after Alan's conversation with his parents, they registered their marriage. Notably, Alejandra asked Alan not to invite her friends and relatives to the wedding, citing a modest celebration and a limited budget. Although the wedding was supposed to be low-key, it was later revealed that Alejandra's father did attend the ceremony. The young family's life initially seemed like a fairy tale, filled with happiness and endless plans for the future. However, this perfect appearance did not last long. Alejandra's hysterical nature and the horrors of this story began to emerge. Although no one expected it at the time, the relationship between the newlyweds began to deteriorate rapidly. Alan was a secretive person who kept his personal life private, sharing few details with friends. As a result, little was known about what was happening behind closed doors. Nonetheless, it was clear that the relationship was no longer the same. The once happy couple now appeared troubled. After meeting Alejandra, Alan became increasingly estranged from his family. The final straw was when he got married without inviting his parents. The rift became so deep that they eventually stopped communicating altogether. Alan's friends began to notice that his wife, Alejandra, was becoming increasingly nervous and irritable. She would lose her temper quickly and behave erratically. After a few incidents, Alan felt ashamed and decided to limit their social interactions. However, the problems at home only worsened, with quarrels occurring daily over trivial matters. One evening, Alejandra went through Alan's cell phone and discovered sexually explicit messages with other women. This revelation was the final straw for her. She claimed that Alan had been physically and mentally abusive, and she could no longer tolerate his infidelity. Instead of seeking counseling or trying to salvage the relationship, Alejandra decided to take a different approach. She chose to focus on planning the perfect murder, using a method she was familiar with. Her attention was now fixed on creating a plan to eliminate Alan. Meanwhile, Alan continues his daily routine, unaware of the shocking events that are about to unfold. Despite limited contact with his family, he attends his grandfather's birthday party. However, the presence of his wife, Alejandra, causes tension, as his parents have made it clear that she is not welcome in their home. This further strains their relationship. It would later become clear that this was the last time the family saw Alan alive. On October 31, 2014, Alan sent a text message to his family, assuring them he had arrived home safely after the party. But after that, all contact ceased. He failed to show up at work for several days, which was unusual for the diligent entrepreneur. His absence was alarming, especially with the launch of a new project imminent, requiring his presence. Alejandra hatched a terrible plan. Alejandra's decision was to kill her husband immediately. Alejandra came up with a plan to kill her husband. She added a strong sleeping pill to the milk he drank before going to bed, then covered him with a pillow. When he passed out, she was faced with the challenge of disposing of his body, something she had no time to plan. Since Alan was too heavy for her to move, Alejandra ran to the neighbor's garden and retrieved an electric saw. With a grim expression, Alejandra dismembered her husband's body into pieces, then packed the remains into garbage bags. To hinder identification, she cut off his fingers and pulled out his teeth. Alejandra stuffed the bags into suitcases, hoping to smuggle the bodies out without raising suspicion. However, her plans were foiled when an elderly neighbor, who suffered from insomnia, watched her from her window as she attempted to leave her home with the suitcases in the early hours of the morning. The neighbor became concerned about Alejandra's early departure and her unusual behavior, as she kept looking around nervously. Little did the neighbor know, Alejandra had scattered the bags containing her ex-husband's remains in various neighborhoods to cover her tracks. Alejandra then returned home, further raising the neighbor's suspicions. As the day began, Alejandra continued her normal routine, hiding her dark secret. Alejandra's father attempted to use his connections and bribes to prevent his daughter's imprisonment, but he was unsuccessful. However, Alberto did manage to keep the trial private to avoid drawing more attention to the case. His motivations were largely self-serving, as Alberto was concerned about the impact the trial would have on his own career. As a specialist, Alberto feared that his reputation would be tarnished by his inability to diagnose and address his own daughter's problems. The trial also brought up the case of Alejandra's first husband's death, but as time passed, the evidence was no longer available. There was also suspicion that Alejandra's father was involved in her crimes. However, these claims were never proven. After multiple appeals from the victims' families, Alejandra's sentence was commuted to death, a rare and unprecedented outcome in Mexico. This sentence is particularly unusual in that it does not allow for a review of the case. As part of the sentence, Alejandra's property will be transferred to the victim's family, although this can provide little comfort in the face of their loss. The case of Chris Watts. Shanann and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in 2012. Shanann was from Aberdeen, while Chris hailed from Spring Lake. On November 3, 2012, they got married, but not everyone was pleased with their union. Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, did not attend the wedding due to Cindy's dislike of Shanann and the way she treated her son. A year after their wedding, Shanann and Chris made a significant decision to buy a new home in Frederick, Colorado. This marked a new chapter in their lives as they started fresh in their new home. After relocating to Colorado, the couple looked forward to starting a family. Their dream was realized on December 17, 2013, with the birth of their daughter, Bella Marie. 2 years later, on July 17, 2015, they welcomed their second daughter, Celeste Catherine, affectionately known as Cece. Shanann was diagnosed with lupus at a young age, a chronic autoimmune disease that affects various parts of the body. The immune system mistakenly attacks healthy cells and tissues, producing autoantibodies that target and destroy them, leading to inflammation and tissue damage. This diagnosis brought devastating news. It would be challenging for her to conceive and have children. Shanann had always dreamed of becoming a mother, and this revelation shattered her. However, she defied the odds, experiencing the incredible joy of motherhood not once, but twice. Shanann was a warm and compassionate person who radiated kindness and positivity. Those who knew her described her as a loving and caring individual who made everyone feel welcome. She had a driven personality, always striving to create a better life for herself and her family. Her vibrant and warm nature effortlessly drew people to her. Shanann was an exceptional mother to her two daughters, Bella and Cece. Her love for them was boundless, and she cherished being a mother more than anything in the world. She was dedicated to providing for her children in every way possible, nurturing and supporting them unconditionally. Bella, the older sibling, was a caring and nurturing child who enjoyed taking care of her younger sister. Cece, on the other hand, was a lively and energetic child who brought joy and laughter to everyone's lives with her vibrant personality. Shanann's friends and family thought she had a perfect marriage, but they found Chris hard to get close to. Despite this, they welcomed him because Shanann was deeply in love with him. In 2015, Shanann and Chris filed for bankruptcy due to significant financial struggles. These included a large mortgage, car payments, loans, medical bills, and a substantial amount of credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, and Shanann worked at a children's hospital call center. By 2016, Shanann had started a new career as a consultant for a multi-level marketing company. She sold a nutritional supplement called Thrive, which was administered through a patch. Shanann was extremely passionate about her job. According to a coworker, Cynthia DeRosette, everyone who met her was drawn to her energy. Shanann was happy with her life, husband, and two daughters, but she had one wish remaining: to have a baby boy to complete their family. In spring 2018, she got an unexpected but pleasant surprise when she found out she was pregnant for the third time. This news filled her with excitement and anticipation. After further tests, Shanann discovered she was having a baby boy. Shanann and Chris were overjoyed, and they chose to name their baby Nico. When Bella and Cece, Shannon's daughters, heard they were going to be big sisters, they were thrilled. During the summer of 2018, Shanann, who was pregnant with Nico at the time, visited her family in North Carolina, while Chris remained in Colorado for work. Shanann took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie. Despite her strained relationship with her in-laws, Shanann wanted her daughters to spend time with their grandparents. When they arrived, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece despite knowing about her peanut allergy, which Shannon had warned her about. Cindy still served Cece a snack containing peanuts, which deeply upset Shannon. She felt that Cindy had recklessly endangered Cece's life. While visiting family in North Carolina, Shannon noticed a strange change in Chris's communication with her. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and puzzled. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to new employees, but assured her it was nothing to worry about. On July 31st, Chris flew from Colorado to North Carolina to spend the week with Shannon and their two daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were thrilled to see their dad, and as Chris stepped off the plane, they rushed to him, beaming with excitement. Chris hugged them tightly, but his greeting to Shannon was different. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Shannon felt deeply hurt by Chris's distant behavior and was unable to hide her emotions. She texted a friend, confessing her growing concern and sadness. She felt like Chris had changed somehow, and she barely recognized the man she had married. Her words were filled with a mix of sorrow and confusion. Shannon texted her friend to say that her husband Chris was refusing to talk to her, even though they were in the same room. Instead of speaking directly, they were communicating through their phones. Shannon shared a photo with her friend that showed her and Chris sitting on separate couches facing away from each other. In her texts, Shannon confided in her friend that she suspected Chris might be interested in someone else. Her friend was shocked and insisted that Chris would never do that, given how much he loved Shannon. In a heartfelt message to her friend, Shannon revealed that Chris had confessed to her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This revelation left Shannon stunned, as she had always believed their love was strong. Chris had made things even more difficult for Shannon by admitting that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings for her. But unfortunately, this didn't happen. Shannon was devastated to hear this, as she valued their relationship and believed their love was strong enough to overcome any obstacles. Determined to rescue her family, Shannon proposed that she and Chris attend couples therapy together, aware that their relationship was struggling and hoping that a professional could help them get through their problems. However, Chris refused point blank. Shannon was prepared to make sacrifices and do everything possible to save their relationship, but she quickly came to realize that Chris was unwilling to meet her halfway. Despite her best attempts, Shannon understood that there was nothing Chris was willing to compromise on, and this made her efforts futile. After returning home to Colorado from a trip to North Carolina, Shannon, Chris, and their daughters settled back into their normal routine. However, Shannon's stay was short-lived as she soon embarked on another trip to Arizona for business. During her time in Arizona, Shannon's friends noticed a change in her behavior. Instead of being her usual cheerful self, she seemed confused, upset, and distressed. One evening in their hotel room, Shannon confided in her friends about her concerns. On August 11th, while Shannon was with her friends in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone showing a charge on her and Chris's account from a restaurant. Although this wasn't unusual, the amount of the bill raised concerns. Shannon wondered why it was so high and suspected that Chris might be dining with another woman. This suspicion left her feeling uneasy and uncertain. Shannon returned home from her business trip around 1:48 a.m. on August 13th. Her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. The doorbell camera footage showed Shannon entering her house at that time. Shannon's friends were worried when she failed to send her usual good morning messages. They knew she had a crucial appointment at the OBGYN at 9:30 a.m., which she would never miss. However, when she also missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became extremely concerned. Nicole was convinced something was amiss when no one had heard from Shannon all day. She couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Feeling a growing sense of urgency, Nicole decided to drive to Shannon's house. As she approached the house, her anxiety spiked. Shannon's van was parked in the garage, and her daily shoes were by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Shannon would come out and explain that she had overslept and was tired from her previous day's flight. But Shannon didn't respond. Chris was contacted by one of Shannon's friends who were unable to reach her. He told them not to worry, saying she might be at a friend's house with their daughters. However, this confused Shannon's friends, since they were all in touch with each other and none knew where she was. Shannon didn't have plans to meet any of them. When her friends threatened to report Shannon and the girls missing to the Frederick Police Department, Chris didn't want to involve the police. Despite this, Nicole, worried about her friend, called 911 to report Shannon, Bella, and Cece missing. After Nicole contacted the police, an officer from the Frederick Police Department responded to Shannon and Chris's residence. The officer's body camera footage showed Nicole was visibly distraught over her missing friend. As Nicole was providing every detail she knew about Shannon and her daughters, Chris arrived at the house. Chris exited his vehicle and approached the officer, but it was apparent he didn't share Nicole's level of concern, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During the search of Shannon and Chris's house, the officer found Shannon's purse. Inside, the officer discovered medication prescribed to Shannon and her two daughters. This discovery further alarmed Nicole, but Chris remained calm. The officer also located Shannon's wedding band on the bedside table. The officer and Chris visited a neighbor to review footage from their security camera, which captured part of Shannon and Chris's driveway and garage. The footage showed Chris opening the garage door, moving around, and leaving the home at 5:28 a.m. As they watched the TV footage, Chris's demeanor began to shift. He grew nervous and fidgety, seemingly uncomfortable with what he was seeing on screen. Even his neighbor noticed Chris's strange behavior. When Chris left the house, the neighbor discreetly confided in the officer, expressing doubts about Chris's behavior, stating that he didn't think Chris was acting normally. Concerned about Shannon's well-being, her friends wanted to launch a search for Bella and Cece immediately. However, Chris vetoed the idea, warning them against joining the search. His lack of concern for his wife and daughters deeply troubled Shannon's friends, who couldn't understand his apathy. Officers went door to door in Shannon and Chris's neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Shannon or noticed anything unusual. The next day, the FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search for Shannon, Bella, and Cece. The Boulder Police Department also provided cadaver dogs to search the property and house. As officers searched the home, a handler commented that the house smelled of cleaning solutions and looked unusually clean, which raised suspicions. The presence of cleaning solutions suggested that someone might be trying to conceal evidence or clean up potential clues. Chris gave an interview outside his home while it was being searched, saying he and Shannon had an emotional conversation before she left, but no argument. He made a heartfelt plea for their return, but came across as aloof and unemotional, sparking suspicion. On August 14th, Special Agent Coder conducted an interview with Chris. During this interview, Chris shared his theory that Shannon might have taken the girls to a friend's house to relax and unwind given the situation. Meanwhile, the police station was flooded with tips about potential sightings of Shannon and the girls, including various photographs. However, when asked to identify any of the individuals in the photos as his missing wife and daughters, Chris was unable to do so. Agent Coder also inquired about Chris and Shannon's marriage. Chris asserted that he had never been unfaithful to Shannon, and, to the best of his knowledge, Shannon had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the kind of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt the urge to stray. Throughout the interview, Agent Coder observed Chris's unusual behavior, specifically his frequent hand movements towards his neck. This caught Agent Coder's attention and sparked his suspicion, leading him to wonder if these movements might be indicative of something more significant. During the interview, Agent Coder stepped out briefly to share his suspicion with the other officers that Chris might have strangled Shannon. As more time passed without any sign of Shannon or her daughters, worry and despair deepened among their loved ones. Despite their growing doubts about Shannon's safety, they clung to the hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. Chris was released from the police department after 3 hours of questioning. However, the authorities asked him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test, and he agreed. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and drove to the Frederick Police Department. Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the polygraph test. During the test, Chris denied knowing Shannon's whereabouts and claimed he had no role in her disappearance. He didn't pass the test, leaving detectives convinced of his involvement in the disappearance and deaths of his wife and daughters. However, they still needed to persuade him to confess. The special agent, Tammy Lee, a highly skilled coder and polygraph expert, confronted Chris about his failed polygraph test results. Chris admitted that he had not physically harmed Shannon, but acknowledged that he had caused her emotional suffering. Additionally, he confessed to having an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger. Chris expressed remorse for his infidelity, stating that he had never intended to engage in such behavior. However, he denied any involvement in the disappearance of his family. During the interview, Chris asked to speak with his father, Ronnie. The officers were initially hesitant, worried that allowing Ronnie into the room would prompt Chris to request legal representation. Despite their reservations, they allowed it, hoping Ronnie's presence might persuade Chris to confess. In the interrogation room, Chris confessed to killing Shannon, claiming he did it because she had supposedly harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, Shannon's friends were certain Chris was lying, knowing that Shannon would never hurt her children, whom she loved deeply and was eager to welcome her new son, Nico. Chris admitted to burying Shannon's body in a shallow grave at one of his work sites and disposing of his daughters' bodies in oil tanks. Despite being arrested and taken into custody, he persisted in denying any harm to them. The detectives didn't believe for a second that Shannon had harmed her daughters. Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing, the judge made a bold statement about the heinous crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had encountered in his career, despite having dealt with thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Shannon in their bed. He had strangled her after she confronted him about his extramarital affair and threatened to take their daughters away. He then put her body in his truck and drove to his work site with their 2 daughters. There, Chris claimed to have killed his daughters, one by one, in a horrific sequence of events, where one daughter was forced to witness her sister's death before meeting the same fate. The case of Vicki Roberts. Vicki Roberts was born in September 1984 in northwest England, where she was raised in a traditional and devoutly religious family. She was the younger of 2 daughters and was raised with strong Christian values. She attended a Christian school, where she also developed her musical talents and sang in the choir. Those who knew Vicki described her as a kind, friendly, and helpful person who was always willing to lend a hand. After completing high school, Vicki enrolled in university and took a part-time job at an IKEA store to support herself. It was there that she met Michael Roberts, and their initial friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. Michael was only a year older than her. Like Vicki, Michael balanced his studies with a part-time job at IKEA and made time for sports. He was also careful about his appearance and made a good impression on those around him. Vicki was initially put off by Michael's bold and outgoing personality, but she soon found herself developing strong romantic feelings for him. Michael was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, to a family of modest means. His father was a successful chemical engineer who expected a lot from his two sons, particularly Michael, the eldest. As a result, Michael grew up with high ambitions and a strong sense of purpose. He was a diligent student and developed into a driven and accomplished individual. Michael was a social butterfly with many friends and was often the life of the party. However, he took the most pride on the love front. With his good looks, sense of humor, and charming personality, Michael was a catch. He was also intelligent and well-read, able to hold his own in conversations on a wide range of topics. Michael's parents had instilled in him the idea that he was exceptional, praising his intelligence, beauty, and potential for success. However, this upbringing may have also fostered narcissistic tendencies. Despite this, Michael felt a deep-seated need to live up to his parents' expectations and be the perfect son, driving him to strive for their approval. Michael had a series of brief relationships and frequently dated multiple people simultaneously. He was confident in his charm and enjoyed the thrill of pursuing women who seemed out of his reach. For Michael, this was a game, a challenge to be won. Vicky is one of the challenges he wants to conquer. She was a modest and unattainable woman who initially kept Michael at arm's length, refusing even casual invitations. Vicky was focused on her studies and spent her free time at church, leaving little room for dating or relationships. Michael, however, was determined to win her over. It took Michael a few months to win Vicky over, but eventually she agreed to go out with him. He had charmed her with his sweet gestures, flowers, gifts, and thoughtful surprises. He even invited her to meet his parents, who immediately took a liking to her and approved of their son's choice. Vicky was convinced that Michael was genuinely interested in her, so she gave in to his advances. He became her first serious partner, and she felt truly happy when she was with him. It seemed like fate had brought them together. Michael also appeared to be in love and ready to settle down, but their happiness was short-lived. From the outside, their relationship seemed perfect. They were both young, attractive, and full of energy and ambition, with big plans for the future. Vicky soon discovered that Michael had a strong and adventurous approach to sex, with a high sex drive and a desire to try new things in the bedroom. At first, Michael didn't pressure Vicky to engage in certain activities, fearing she would leave him. However, once he felt secure in their relationship, he revealed his true desires. Vicky, a modest and religious person, was shocked but deeply in love with Michael and trusted him, keeping their private life a secret. Things took a turn when Michael proposed to Vicky, and she happily accepted, believing that marriage would bring an end to his experimental behavior. However, her closest friend began to notice Vicky covering up bruises and marks under her clothes. When confronted by her friend, Vicky initially denied any wrongdoing by Michael but eventually confessed that the marks were a result of Michael's affinity for bondage, toys, and other devices during their intimate moments. Vicky confided in her friend that she and Michael had intimate relations up to 5 times a week. Michael considered himself a skilled lover, viewing intimacy as an art form and the means of self-expression. Although he would occasionally compromise when Vicky refused to participate in his more extreme and reckless experiments, he usually managed to persuade her to give in to his desires. After graduating, Vicky became pregnant unexpectedly and decided to change careers. She soon landed a job as an account manager at a logistics company. Michael also left his job at IKEA and became a sales consultant at a large electronics retailer, selling phones, laptops, and other gadgets. Thanks to his charisma and persuasive abilities, he consistently exceeded his sales targets and quickly became one of the top-performing employees. Michael's success led to a promotion to senior sales, and he was being considered for a transfer to the company's main office. However, he needed to undergo additional training to improve his qualifications first. Michael enjoyed the training sessions and business trips to London, and he took great pride in his accomplishments. As a result, he often forgot about Vicky, his young fiancée, and only remembered her when he wanted intimacy. Vicky and Michael's relationship was lacking in several ways. They rarely spoke about each other or spent time together outside of the bedroom, making Vicky feel invisible to him. Meanwhile, Michael was secretly having affairs with coworkers, clients, and casual acquaintances. During this time, Vicky discovered she was pregnant and shared the news with Michael, expecting him to be thrilled and expedite their wedding plans. Instead, he was furious and insisted that she terminate the pregnancy, citing their youth and the fact that they had their whole lives ahead of them. Vicky was shocked and refused to consider abortion. Michael then attempted to persuade Vicky by appealing to her concerns about her family. He claimed that her parents, who were deeply religious, would be angry and disappointed in her for becoming pregnant out of wedlock. However, Michael promised that if Vicky agreed to have an abortion, they could keep and plan to have children after they were married. Vicky was faced with a tough decision, but Michael's persistence eventually won her over, and she went to the hospital. Unfortunately, the experience was complicated, and Vicky had to stay in the hospital for a few days. It took her nearly 3 weeks to recover. During this time, her doctor strictly advised her against intimate relationships. When Michael found out, he became furious. It was then that Vicky realized Michael had mental health issues and an addiction to sex. Without intimacy, he became unbearable, frequently leaving the house, citing urgent work matters. Vicky suspects Michael is having an affair, and she hoped that getting married would help him change his ways and be more committed to their relationship. As it turned out, their relationship was loveless, and Michael was leading a double life. Their 2-year engagement was just a convenient arrangement for him, as he had a loyal partner waiting for him at home, taking care of the household, while he maintained a string of mistresses on the side, which he frequently replaced. Vicky always trusted Michael and forgave him whenever he cheated, as long as he promised it wouldn't happen again. However, as time passed, Vicky began to pressure Michael into getting married, as she wanted to start a family and have children. Her parents also brought up the topic frequently, but what really pushed Michael to consider marriage was the insistence of his own parents, whom he didn't want to disappoint. Michael's parents adored Vicky, thinking she was perfect for their son. They constantly asked and they would tie the knot and give them grandchildren. With the help of his parents, Michael and Vicky organized a grand wedding, complete with a white dress, limousine, and a beautiful ceremony. The newlyweds appeared to be in love and happy, with a long life ahead of them. After the wedding, they settled into a large, cozy house in a prestigious area of Warrington, close to Michael's parents. Despite their marriage, Michael didn't truly love Vicky. It was more of a way to appear normal to others. Vicky never expressed her concerns about Michael's unusual behavior and frequent infidelity, allowing him to freely change partners. Meanwhile, Michael's career was thriving. He received a promotion and a significant salary increase after being transferred to a new office. His direct supervisor was Carrie Hall, the head of administration at Phones for You. Carrie was a decade older than Michael, divorced, and raising her son independently. Despite her tough exterior, she was attractive, well put together, and strong-willed, as her position demanded. For a while, she ignored Michael's subtle advances, but to him, her indifference was a signal to take action. Michael set out to win over Carrie, using his natural charm and eloquence to capture her attention. After about a month, Carrie reciprocated his interest, and they began a regular affair, meeting in hotel rooms. Their relationship was intense and passionate, with a focus on experimentation and exploration. Carrie, a confident and mature woman, was flattered by the attention of the younger Michael. She was aware that Michael was unlikely to end his marriage for her. Michael, on the other hand, was eager to explore his desires with Carrie, which he felt he couldn't express with his wife. He would often lie to his wife about working late or attending corporate events, while confiding in Carrie about his unhappy marriage and his desire to divorce. However, he never made any concrete moves to end his marriage. The affair lasted for over a year, with Carrie seemingly content with the arrangement. She made no demands from Michael to leave his wife and was satisfied with their clandestine meetings and the excitement they brought. Carrie's behavior changed as she started dressing more conservatively, covering her body with long sleeves and high-necked clothing, a departure from her usual style that highlighted her athletic build. Carrie confided in her close friend about her lover Michael's extreme intimate experiments, which often crossed a line. She showed her friend the evidence, a bite mark on her chest and bruises on her neck from his intense grip. There were also marks on her wrists from the ropes he used to tie her up, giving him complete control. The friend was alarmed and urged Carrie to report the incidents to the police, but Carrie refused, explaining that the acts were consensual and Michael usually warned her about what he was going to do. However, the intensity of the experiences often got out of hand. For instance, Michael enjoyed choking his partner, claiming it would enhance the experience, but there were times when Carrie lost consciousness due to his excessive enthusiasm. Carrie's friend was fearful of Michael's strangulation games, but Carrie consistently gave in to his persuasion, believing that he would eventually stop or that she would become desensitized to the experience. Sadly, neither Carrie nor any of Michael's mistresses made any attempt to stop his cruel and painful experiments. Vicky had suspicions about her Michael's infidelity even before they got married. She believed that her love and care could change him and make him a devoted family man. However, after the wedding, his cheating continued and even worsened. When Michael denied his infidelity, Vicky decided to investigate on her own. One night, while Michael was asleep, Vicky checked his phone and found numerous intimate conversations with other women, including Carrie. She was shocked to discover that Michael had exchanged explicit photos with some of these women. The discovery was devastating for Vicky, and she packed her bags and temporarily moved in with a friend. Vicky kept her situation a secret from her family, fearing their reaction. She was afraid that her religious relatives would pressure her to get a divorce if they found out about Michael's adultery. Despite her heartbreak, Vicky still loved Michael and didn't want to give up on their marriage. Before leaving, she wrote him a heartfelt letter, confessing her love and telling him that he was the most important person in her life. Michael's wife had finally had enough of his promiscuous and decided to leave him. Before she went, she wrote him a handwritten note explaining that she knew about his cheating and couldn't take it anymore. She left the note on the refrigerator and gave him time to think about his actions, but made it clear that she wouldn't file for divorce just yet. Despite his wife's departure, Michael didn't seem to be particularly upset or remorseful. However, he did realize that he would miss having a quiet and submissive partner who took care of the household and tolerated his behavior. He decided to try to win her back and followed her to her friend's house, bringing a large bouquet of flowers. He apologized and begged her to return, promising to be faithful from then on. His wife, Vicky, wanted to believe him and decided to give him another chance. For a while, Michael made an effort to be more considerate and even came home for dinner. He deleted his correspondence with his mistress, Carrie, and changed his social media password to avoid suspicion. However, Michael's good behavior didn't last long. He soon started pursuing a new female employee, Karen Wilson, who was engaged to be married. Despite her initial reluctance, Michael persisted in his pursuit of her, and they began an affair. Meanwhile, he continued to see Carrie on the side, juggling multiple relationships at once. He became infatuated with a new woman and ended his relationship with 33-year-old Carrie Hall after 2 months, as he had grown tired of her. He told Karen a fabricated story about being unhappy in his marriage and claimed he was willing to leave his wife for her. Karen believed him, and they had an intimate encounter in the office. A week later, she ended her engagement, expecting Michael to follow through on his promise. Michael had no intention of divorcing his wife, Vicky, but he wanted to keep his new mistress. To keep her happy, he lied to her, telling her that he had already filed for divorce and was living with his parents. However, Vicky soon became suspicious that Michael was still cheating on her. She decided to take action and gathered evidence of his adultery. While Michael was in the shower, Vicky took his phone but found nothing incriminating because he had deleted all his text messages and changed his social media password. Undeterred, she waited until he fell asleep and then took his work laptop, where she found his social media account still logged in. There, she discovered messages between Michael and his new girlfriend, in which he professed his love and claimed to be divorcing Vicky and living with his parents. Vicky was shocked and took screenshots of the messages as proof of Michael's infidelity. She also found receipts for hotel rooms in his wallet. The next morning, she confronted Michael, presenting him with the evidence adultery. For the first time in their relationship, she lost her temper. Michael was taken aback and tried to apologize, promising it would never happen again. However, Vicky threatened to tell his parents about his infidelity, hoping they could talk some sense into him since she couldn't. Michael was enraged by his wife Vicky's threat to tell his parents about their problems. In a fit of anger, he slapped her. Vicky then got up and said she would go to his parents immediately, heading for the door. Michael caught up to her, grabbed a heavy jewelry box from the dresser, and hit her in the head twice, knocking her unconscious. He then strangled her with his bare hands until she stopped breathing. Feeling no remorse, Michael wrapped Vicky's body in a blanket, placed it in large garbage bags, and carried it to the garage. He quickly cleaned the house, packed up most of Vicky's belongings, and removed them. He then invited his lover, Karen, over, and they had dinner, had fun, and made love in the same bedroom where the murder had taken place. The next day, Michael ran off with Karen. He told his parents that Vicky had left him for another man, even showing them fake messages from Vicky's phone, which he had sent himself. He went to his parents' home, sobbing on his mother's shoulder, pretending to be distraught over his wife's supposed infidelity. Michael sent his parents-in-law messages saying that their daughter had left him for another man. He also told them to give her space and not to bother her. The messages claimed that Vicky had fallen out of love with Michael and had moved in with someone else. Her parents were shocked and tried to contact Vicky to hear her side of the story, but she refused to answer their calls, only responding with messages asking for time. Vicky's parents found Michael's story suspicious and went to his house to confront him. However, his explanation only raised more questions. They soon discovered that Vicky had not shown up for work, which further alarmed them. They decided to report their concerns to the police, leading to an investigation. On December 1st, 2009, Michael bought a shovel, rope, rags, and cleaning supplies from a hardware store. However, the police arrived at his house on the same day. He had been caught before he could dispose of a body. The police initially found nothing out of the ordinary, but Michael's actions and alibi sparked suspicion and raised several questions. Notably, they overlooked a large package in the garage during their search. Inside the house, they found no signs of her presence, such as clothes, documents, or personal items, which could suggest she had left of her own accord. However, Vicky's laptop was discovered in the bedroom, and upon seizing it, the police found screenshots of Michael's incriminating conversations with his mistresses, which Vicky had saved. The investigation took a significant turn when authorities made a geolocation request to Vicky's cell phone, which had been regularly sending messages to her husband and relatives. To everyone's surprise, the phone was found to be located in the marital home of Vicky and Michael. This led to a second, more thorough search of the Roberts residence. During this search, a suspicious package was discovered in the garage, and its contents shocked all who were present. However, in a stunning twist, Michael, who had been cooperating with the police, suddenly vanished into thin air. He had taken a wallet containing cash, which allowed him to evade capture for several days. After his money ran out, Michael turned to one of his mistresses, Lavinia T., and asked if he could stay with her for a while. However, When Levinia heard on the news that Michael was wanted for his wife's murder, she immediately contacted the police and reported his whereabouts. Eventually, he was arrested, put on trial, and convicted. When the authorities arrived to arrest Michael, he claiming he was innocent of the crime. A man claimed that his wife died accidentally during a consensual sex game where she asked him to strangle her with a rope belt, but he lost control. However, forensic experts disputed this claim, finding that she was actually strangled with bare hands, attacked from behind, and had 2 severe head injuries that occurred before her death, which were unrelated to the alleged sex game. The trial began in January 2010, with the defendant, Michael Roberts, maintaining that his wife's death was an accident and hoping for a lenient sentence. However, the autopsy results revealed a different story. Roberts had intentionally hit his wife on the head twice, then strangled her, and hidden her body in the garage. As a result, Roberts was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. The case of Kristen Rossum. Kristen Rossum, a chemistry graduate student at San Diego State University, had the potential for a bright future. However, she is now serving a life sentence at a women's facility in Central California for crimes committed against her husband, Ralph, and Constance Rossum. Kristen is a mother of 3, and despite her efforts to prepare them for a successful future, her own life took a different turn. Her children were receiving a well-rounded education with regular schooling, tutors, and participation in extracurricular activities designed to develop their talents. However, Kristen, who was fragile and impulsive, struggled to maintain this pace. She began to skip classes and sought escape from her reality, initially finding comfort and forgetfulness in this avoidance. However, after consuming alcohol, the calming effect wore off, and Kristen became dependent on methamphetamine, the most addictive illegal substance in the United States. The drug induced clouds of paranoia, euphoria, and hallucinations, leading to Kristen's erratic behavior and detachment from reality, as well as a lack of parental attention. Kristen confessed to being addicted to substances since her high school days, which was devastating news for her family of college-educated professionals. After months of turmoil with her parents, the 17-year-old Kristen secretly left home and went on vacation to Mexico with her friends, where she met Gregory DeVette, a tall, handsome man, 7 years her senior. Gregory took on a paternal role, and Kristen landed a job at the local forensic department as a toxicology assistant, impressing her employers with her skills and momentarily forgetting her addiction. Her position in toxicology gave Kristen access to controlled substances, and she went on to graduate from college with honors. Her relationship with Gregory lasted about 5 years, culminating in a grand wedding on May 5, 1999. Kristen's parents adored Gregory and were convinced that their daughter had overcome her dependency and was headed towards a life of great promise and happiness. In March 2000, Kristen landed a job as a toxicologist at the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office, where she learned to analyze body fluids for controlled substances. However, she soon became disillusioned with her mundane life and sought thrills elsewhere. She found an opportunity with her new colleague, Michael Robertson, who had just been appointed head of the department. As their romance blossomed, Kristen's marriage to Gregory began to unravel, despite his efforts to save it. Aware of his wife's vulnerabilities, Gregory struggled to hold on, but Kristen had made up her mind. On Monday, May 6th, she asked for a divorce. On November, Kristen went to work as usual, but she was very tired and worried about her husband Greg, who was sick and stayed home. In the days following their difficult conversation, Kristen was uneasy, but Greg seemed calm and indifferent. Uncharacteristically, Kristen informed her workplace about her husband's illness and visited him during her lunch break. That same day, at 9:22 p.m., Greg was asleep, and Kristen called the emergency services to report that her husband was not breathing, fearing he might have taken his own life. Overwhelmed with emotion, Kristen cried on the phone and didn't follow the dispatcher's instructions to examine Greg's body, and potentially administer first aid. The police and paramedics arrived at the scene at 10:19 p.m. and found Greg lying lifeless on the bedroom floor, surrounded by scattered rose petals, with an exposed stem nearby. A preliminary examination revealed that Greg had likely consumed a lethal dose of multiple controlled substances, with empty vials of strong painkillers scattered around the room. Torn wedding photos were also found in his bed. During the interrogation, Kristen stated that she had told Greg about their separation the previous night, a mere 17 months after their wedding. Kristen regretted marrying him, feeling she had rushed into it. She mentioned that Greg was too clingy and she wanted space. Greg's death was officially classified as a suicide, with the autopsy revealing that he had succumbed to a lethal dose of strong sedatives. Kristen gave her consent for the cremation to proceed, but Gregory's family and friends were adamant that he would never take his own life. None of them had noticed any unusual changes in his personality or mood that might have hinted at his supposed suicide. In fact, Greg was known to be strongly opposed to controlled substances and would never resort to using them. His relatives were so convinced of foul play that they intervened to stop the cremation, demanding an independent autopsy to uncover the truth. The family's persistence led investigators to consider a murder scenario soon after the incident. An autopsy revealed a significant amount of fentanyl, a painkiller 150 times stronger than morphine, as well as smaller amounts of clonazepam and traces of oxycodone. Investigators suspected that someone else might have administered the lethal dose of fentanyl to Gregory, given the strong influence of clonazepam and other drugs found in his system. Since fentanyl is not an over-the-counter drug, Kristen became the prime suspect due to her knowledge and access to these substances. She was subsequently questioned by the police. During the police questioning, Kristen's disheveled appearance and erratic behavior suggested she was struggling with drug dependence, which she confirmed in her testimony. On the day of Gregory's death, Kristen's account of events was inconsistent. She initially told paramedics that Gregory had not taken any medication, but later suggested he might have been taking oxycodone. At the hospital, Kristen told a nurse that Gregory might have overdosed on oxycodone. Like other opioids, oxycodone can not only relieve pain, but also produce feelings of euphoria. However, it can weaken the respiratory system, and if not treated promptly, its use can be fatal. During their conversation with Kristen, police considered the possibility that Gregory's death was an accidental overdose of cold medicine and oxycodone. They also learned that Gregory was distressed about their failed marriage, which led Kristen to claim that he had taken his own life. This sparked another investigation, which uncovered more details. On November 8th, Russ Lowe, a co-worker of Kristen's, contacted the police and informed them about Kristen's affair with her boss, Dr. Robertson. This new information shifted the direction of the police investigation. Investigators found evidence of Kristen's relationship with Dr. Robertson, including passionate emails and computer files. They also discovered Dr. Robertson's expertise in fentanyl through professional articles. The evidence pieced together to suggest that Gregory had become a threat to the lovers. As Kristen had access to labs and controlled substances, it was suspected that she was secretly using them, and Dr. Robertson was covering for her. Dr. Robertson told detectives that he was aware of his lover's drug addiction. Although no charges were filed against the couple at the time, they were both fired for violating several rules during the investigation. Serious trouble began for Kristen in January when police raided her house, finding drug traces and evidence of personal drug use. She was arrested but later released on bail. As the investigation progressed, new information emerged, including her diary, which was seized during the initial search. Apparently, Kristen tried to conceal her involvement and assert her innocence by creating the illusion that her husband Gregory's death was self-inflicted. On the day of his death, she bought a rose, revealing her internal motivations. The medical examination revealed that Gregory was unconscious for at least 6 hours before he died, and his death may have occurred an hour or an hour and a half before it was officially confirmed. Furthermore, bruises were found around the needle mark on his arm. A shortage of the drug that led to Gregory's death, as well as other controlled substances, were discovered at Kristen's workplace. Police believe Kristen poisoned Gregory with alcohol and fentanyl without his knowledge. Kristen was arrested on June 25, 2001, and charged with first-degree murder. After 6 months in detention, she was released on bail, and the first trial began soon after. The prosecution's main theory was that she killed Gregory because he threatened to damage her good girl reputation by revealing her repeated drug use and affair with Michael Robertson. The prosecution alleged that Kristen fatally poisoned Gregory with fentanyl, a synthetic opiate that is 80 times more potent than morphine. According to them, Kristen initially attempted to kill Gregory using clonazepam, but after this attempt failed, she administered the fentanyl. The prosecution also contended that Kristen subsequently staged the scene in the bedroom to give the impression that Gregory had committed suicide by tearing out pages from her diary, scattering rose petals around his body, and positioning a wedding photo nearby. The court was told that Kristen, a biochemistry graduate, used her knowledge of drugs and chemistry to kill Gregory. Prosecutors alleged that Kristen tried to make her colleagues at the medical examiner's office believe Gregory's death was a suicide by withholding information about the fentanyl. However, before the autopsy could take place, Kristen was transferred to a different laboratory, and attempts to alter the toxicology report were unsuccessful. It was stated that on the morning of November 6th, Kristen phoned the owner of Gregory's apartment to report his absence, then went to work. Her colleagues testified that about an hour after arriving at the lab around 9 a.m., Kristen was seen crying in her manager Michael's office. The apartment building where Kristen and Gregory lived reported seeing Kristen return home at 12:10 p.m. At 12:41 p.m., she visited a local grocery store, buying several items, including a credit card statement with red roses, which confirmed she was still alive a few hours before Gregory's death. Kristen made several calls to Dr. Michael Brian Blackburn, the San Diego County medical examiner who performed Gregory's autopsy. Dr. Blackburn testified that Gregory had been dead for at least an hour before the paramedics arrived. At the time of death, Gregory was in the early stages of bronchopneumonia, a condition that occurs when breathing secretions accumulate in the lungs due to unconsciousness or inadequate breathing. The doctor also noted that Gregory's bladder contained a substantial amount of urine, which would have caused significant discomfort if he were conscious. From this, Dr. Blackburn inferred that Gregory had experienced breathing difficulties for around 6 to 12 hours before his death. Dr. Blackburn testified that the amount of clonazepam in Gregory's blood was insufficient to cause an overdose and was not the cause of death. In contrast, Dr. Theodore Stanley, testifying for the prosecution, explained that fentanyl is a powerful and fast-acting painkiller with serious side effects, including the potential to lead to respiratory arrest. The speed at which fentanyl takes effect depends on how it is administered, with peak effects occurring approximately 16 hours after a transdermal patch is applied, 20 to 30 minutes after oral administration, 15 to 20 minutes after intramuscular injection, and within 5 minutes of intravenous injection. Dr. Stanley noted that fentanyl is not usually given orally because the liver breaks down about 65% of it, leaving only 35% to enter the bloodstream. Both Dr. Blackburn and Dr. Stanley were unable to provide a clear explanation for how fentanyl entered Gregory's system. However, Dr. Stanley suggested that the varying concentrations of fentanyl in Gregory's body, combined with evidence that he was unconscious and breathing shallowly in the hours leading up to his death, indicate that fentanyl may have been administered to him. Although the prosecutor could not definitively explain how Kristen poisoned Gregory, the evidence suggested that she might have applied a fentanyl patch to his arm while he was sleeping. The fact that 15 patches went missing from the lab where Kristen previously worked supports this possibility. The defense claims Kristen is innocent, acknowledging that fentanyl caused Gregory's death, but arguing that he intentionally took it to end his life due to desperation, stemming from family problems. In court, Kristen testified that on November 6th, she woke up to find Gregory in distress. At 7:42 a.m., she called his employer to report his illness and absence from work. Kristen told the court she went to her job but returned home to check on Gregory, asking why he was so upset. Gregory told her he felt unwell, having taken oxycodone and clonazepam, and planned to stay home and sleep. Under cross-examination, the prosecutor questioned Kristen's explanation, pointing out its strangeness. Kristen admitted to previously lying and hiding Gregory's drug use. The prosecutor suggested to the court that fentanyl was the ideal poison due to its difficulty in detection, knowledge Kristen likely acquired from her job. According to autopsy and toxicology results, Gregory was unconscious for around 6 to 8 hours, contradicting Kristen's claim of having lunch with him that day. The defense argued that Dr. Blackbourne's finding of non-fatal blood levels of clonazepam was irrelevant because the combination of oxycodone, an opiate, and clonazepam, a benzodiazepine, can create a synergistic effect, making them more potent together. They suggested that Gregory may have unintentionally taken the drugs himself and questioned why the high levels of these substances in his system remained unexplained. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Kristen guilty of first-degree murder and murder under special circumstances by poisoning. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Despite maintaining her innocence and pleading no contest, Kristen's appeal was unsuccessful due to a mistake by her own defense team. They acknowledged that fentanyl caused Gregory's death, but failed to test autopsy samples for fentanyl metabolites, which could have determined whether Gregory ingested fentanyl or if the fentanyl found in the samples resulted from laboratory contamination after his death. The appeals court was told that there was a problem with the handling of the autopsy samples, which could have affected their integrity. Specifically, the samples were stored in an unsealed cardboard box, with each container labeled as coming from Gregory's body. The box was left at the medical examiner's office for about 36 hours before being sent to the forensic laboratory, which raised concerns that someone with access to the office could have tampered with the samples during that time. Kristen's appeal argued that on November 8, 2000, Michael had informed a toxicologist that he had tested a sample of Gregory's stomach contents for fentanyl breakdown products. However, this information was not included in the original autopsy report. The Court of Appeal ruled that Kristen's lawyer should have objected to the prosecution's claim that her husband died from a fentanyl overdose and should have tested the autopsy samples for substances that break down into fentanyl instead of just accepting that as the cause of death. Although the conviction was not overturned, the case was sent back to the federal court to determine whether this mistake by the defense could have changed the trial's outcome. U.S. Supreme Court ruled federal courts must respect state court decisions, denying Kristen's appeal and keeping her in custody. Her trial named Michael Robertson, Kristen Rossum's former boss and lover, as co-defendant. Though he's lived freely in Australia since 2000, he could be arrested and bailed for $100,000 if he returns to the U.S.